Okay, so I'm going to do just a very brief review of what we did in the morning, and then we could take any, as I said, practical questions. Really, the review doesn't have to be very extensive because so far we've just done the very basic instructions. And so we are starting, the aim or the subject of this retreat is the Kai Anupasana, which is contemplation of the body. And it is the first of the four satipaṭṭhānas, the four foundations of mindfulness or the ways of establishing mindfulness. And so in the first session, I did the kind of overview of contemplation of the body. And we see that there are roughly six, when you take all of the exercises together, six primary subjects. And the root or foundation of them in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta is mindfulness of breathing. And I think that there's a reason why in the Theravada tradition, at any rate, mindfulness of breathing is placed at the beginning. And that is because the first of the, well, let me say that the mindfulness of breathing, if it's carried to its fullest extent, becomes a very deep, profound, and powerful and far-reaching meditation subject. In fact, it's the subject that the Buddha himself, according to tradition, used on the night of his enlightenment. It was through mindfulness of breathing that he attained samadhi, and and then it was through mindfulness of breathing that he developed insight and finally reached the full and complete enlightenment. And so the mindfulness of breathing, if it's carried to its fullest extent, can lead to the ultimate goal of Buddhism, to full enlightenment and the liberation, final liberation of the mind. But we also find mindfulness of breathing placed at the starting point in the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness. And I think the reason for this is indicated in a statement that the Buddha makes in the Samyutta Nikaya. He says, also in the Majjhima Nikaya, that mindfulness of breathing is peaceful, tranquil, and sublime. Peaceful and excellent. And it dispels and stills unwholesome states of mind whenever they arise. And he uses a simile. It's just like there's a dusty road and the little breezes are blowing up the dust. And then a spring rain comes along, and that spring rain, as it trickles down, it causes the dust, the particles of dust to subside, and then the road becomes clear of dust. And so mindfulness of breathing we can use at the outset as a way of helping to still, to quiet down the waves of thought formations and gain some degree of starting with mindfulness, building up some momentum of mindfulness, and then turning that mindfulness towards the focusing of the mind, the collecting of the mind. And it might seem at the beginning when we're doing our first sessions that it might seem that it's not succeeding very well in this. And sometimes people get the impression when they're doing mindfulness of breathing that it's bringing up more thoughts than they have in their ordinary day-to-day life. But this is because the attempt, the effort to keep the mind centered on the breath is providing a kind of backdrop, a blank backdrop to the workings of our mind. So ordinarily, when we're engaged in activities, we don't see very clearly how the mind is functioning at a very subtle level, moment-to-moment level. And so the mind is constantly drifting, constantly throwing up thoughts, plans, formations, memories, sometimes just passing so quickly that we don't even recognize them. But when we make the effort to keep the mind focused on a single, simple object, this is like casting a spotlight on the workings of the mind. One of my first teachers compared this to, it's like having a room, like an attic like an attic in which the windows are all shaded. And so you don't see what's in the attic. But when you open the windows and then the light comes into the attic, then you could see that there are little particles of dust floating in the air. And you might think, it's the sunlight that's caused the dust to arise from the furniture in the attic and cause the dust to be floating through the air. But actually, that's not the case at all. The dust has always been floating there. But it's just when you open the window or the window shade, then the sunlight comes through and illuminates the particles of dust. And so this is what the effort to focus the mind on a simple object like the breath is doing. It's illuminating the workings of our mind. But as we persist with the effort, and here on a very short retreat like this, we could only expect a limited degree of success in this, we are dispelling these random thought formations and collecting the energies of the mind, the power of the consciousness, and focusing it upon something which is very, very simple, very, very plain and ordinary. And then in the days to come, we're going to use that collected mind to start investigating and examining other aspects of bodily experience.